I do want to talk a little bit about the Challenger Series. Let's move away from Dota for a little bit.
Yeah, Challenger Series.
I don't know what that means. I wrote a note because someone told me to, and I don't know what it means.
So Challenger Series is Riot's attempt to legitimize basically the lower tiers of competitive play. The highest ranking on the league competitive ladder is called Challenger, and it's basically them being like, oh, we need to cultivate talent that will eventually make it into LCS. So they're creating a lesser league, so kind of like you got minor league teams.
Amateur league.
Amateur league.
I wouldn't call them amateurs because you got to be really good.
Yeah,
to
I mean,
Challenger.
they're, people who are in Challenger League are people even though they just got qualified for in the expansion tournament for NA LCS, is like Curse. Curse Academy is really good.
All right, translation time. Challenger, is that like 6K MMR in Dota?
Yeah, it is.
Like 5K?
It is the highest you can go.
Oh, it's the high. Okay.
So
Okay.
it'd be 7 then.
Yeah, I think that's the max. Like it's like pro. Like pros get that
they're
ranking.
basically pros. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. Okay.
And so it's usually like rank 5 teams. And it's basically, so what it is, I'll give you the TLDR, which they actually have listed here. The Challenger Series will be changing to a new format. So they've had this before, but they're just changing it up so it's a little.
Was it not very? It was kind of loose and fast or whatever.
Kinda. It was it just wasn't very clear, and they're making it very clear and explicit what it is now, at least to me. It's changing to a new format that better mirrors the LCS with 6-team league with 8 weeks of competition, including 3 weeks of qualifiers. Third and fourth place teams from the expansion tournament will be secured in the pre-qualified spots in 2015 Spring Challenger Series. So people who basically came in third, fourth, and did not qualify for LCS in the expansion tournament will have a place in this already, rather than having to compete on the ladder for it.
Wait, so is this pro teams getting knocked down to a Challenger Series?
Yeah, so basically that's
Like you didn't make LCS, so you get to play with the minor leagues?
Yeah, basically.
Wow.
Yeah. So like
To wreck them.
I don't know if that's... Yeah, is that like...
But I wouldn't say they're going to wreck them. Like I personally don't think the skill disparity is going to be huge.
No,
Like,
I mean the difference between the top 2 teams in the LCS and the top 2 teams in Challenger Series is pretty large, but the rest of the gap, I think, in between like the rest of LCS is pretty much they're there.
it'll just be like performance jitters or like the experience of competing.
Yes,
Interesting.
like
Okay.
competing on stage.
Yeah.
Let's see. First, second, and third place teams will have an opportunity to enter LCS. So that's during relegation. So the bottom 3 teams will go up against the top 3 teams of the Challenger Series and compete, basically. So that's how we get new teams into LCS, and you won't have as much stale stuff, which is great.
Okay, so it's like more visibility for
small
teams.
teams, and they're giving a little bit more stability to it, and
So it's not always the same teams that are in
So
in the
what-
spotlight.
Okay, so this is going to affect a relatively small number of players, but can you like spectate all this? Like, will there be like good?
I mean, they're doing this to LC. Like, it's again, they're supporting it, like of giving them exposure, because they'll do it on LOL Esports on Twitch and everything. Like, they'll have actual broadcasters doing it. Like, you can't watch. I think you can watch in client somehow.
So it's not a thing that's just gonna like happen off to the side.
No.
Okay.
I mean, it will be like LCS games, and then you'll have a challenger game, like a team play right after that.
Do you think people will be?
Go ahead.
Do you think people will be just as interested? Well, maybe not just as interested, but do you think people want to watch that stuff?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do. I
Absolutely.
think people are still
You
craving.
want to see the people who are coming up. Like,
Yeah.
we
You don't
know
always wanna
we know
watch
the
the big
popular
boys.
teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know the popular team, but who's next? Like, these are the people who
So
might
this is
be
like
taking.
who's the next Reckless kind
Like,
of thing, right?
well,
Yeah.
it's like we spoke about it last episode. It's like Unicorns with Love during IEM. Like those guys were
out of nowhere,
but
now are like one of like the favorite teams now. But there wasn't exposure for them because
yeah.
the
Because they're
format.
not Cloud9 or
Sure.
TSM or
Yeah.
But it wasn't like there wasn't a place for them to be exposed, like in terms of like
it wasn't a place for them to expose themselves.
Yes.
Sorry, I know that feeling.
And there was, and again, I'm not saying this is completely new. There was a Challenger Series, but I think they're just making it like they're changing up the format so it mirrors more of what LCS is, and so like they can play round robin stuff where you're gonna play each team I think twice.
So this is basically them turning the amateur pro league into getting as much similar spotlight to the pro series.
Yeah, and then that's not the only thing. It's just them changing over to the format which mirrors LCS, which is easier to follow.
Cool.
Like there is a thing that Eternal Envy wrote, who's a Dota player this week, about the state of Dota.
Oh, so good. Is that kind of happening in League as well?
No, but it's because they don't have that. There is
a structure.
There is one structure and they run it.
There's OGN, which is Korean. There's LPL, which is Chinese, and there's LCS, which is the EU and LA. Like there's three like big leagues. There's some other smaller ones, and then they have like IEM, which is like the off-season games. But like LCS is the end-all be-all, pretty much for North American and European teams, and so like they don't have to worry about that stuff because it's like Riot is directly supporting it rather than having the one big event like Worlds. They have the big event and then they have a supported league structure.
Riot's really good about that.
Yeah, that's what I
they're
was-
so good about supporting their different.
Their community.
Yeah, like I mean, there's like college, like collegiate.
Yeah.
Collegiate lines,
Like,
yep.
Yeah.
They're really smart. They're taking the esports scene and they're just cultivating the future of it and making it a lot more appealing by giving these people like a spotlight. So people who are playing, they're like, well, I'm really good, I'm challenger, but I'll never get on stage because I'm not pro. And now there's an opportunity.
That's
so
really
cool.
interesting because if you look at a company like Valve, their philosophy is in like game design and in how they operate is like, we're gonna make this cool thing and like make it really robust, and then we're gonna give it to you, and you're gonna take care of it and run with it. And then community makes their items, community sets up their tournaments, makes tickets for tournaments, makes items that come with those tickets for tournaments. And now the pro players, Eternal Envy, and he's not alone, are saying like, hey, there's like too much and it's not organized and no one's getting anything done.
You need a
And
regulatory
neat. It's
body.
kind of neat to see the totally separate
Yeah.
style
Yep.
from those companies.
And like there was like discussion about like, well, how do we fix this? Okay, you start a regulatory body. Okay, who's that funded by? Who's doing that organization? You need someone full time. You need a couple people doing that full time. Where does that money come from? Now, like player associations, those require players giving money to the player association for that able to like help them with that. Well, people don't make enough money. So it's very strange where it's like Valve just, I'm not gonna say they don't care because they do, but they're just like, well, you guys can figure it out. Where Riot's just like, no, we're just gonna take it all internal and we'll figure it out. And now that causes controversy on its own because sometimes they make unpopular decisions, but it's usually for the health of their league, and it almost always works out for them.
Kind of reflected by the viewership and like the pro scene and how many people play League. I mean, the fact that Riot's cultivating and curating their whole competitive scene.
I think that's part of it, and not to get into any stupid like fanboy stuff, but like League is easier to jump into.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
much
absolutely.
easier.
It is-
I mean,
it
we
is
concede that. Like
Yeah.
you and I, like I started in Dota. You taught me a lot of how to play Dota, and when I went to play League, I was okay.
Yeah,
Out
I
of the gate,
started-
I felt good playing League.
I started League and then went to Dota, and I was like, what?
Yeah, no, League is
Okay.
far and away the more accessible, easier to enjoy, and often more enjoyable game.
Yep.
There's a couple things I want to bring up just actually relating to that. I'm gonna move off that. But
Yeah.
LCS is starting January 22nd. Very excited about that.
Ooh, that's soon.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Oh God, it's soon. This year is flown.
Yeah.
That's when you and I go gold, James. We're gonna go challenger.
Oh,
No.
man.
No,
I don't have time for Challenger.
That's the only issue. You don't have time
that's
for
it.
it.
I don't
It's
have
just
time for it.
time.
You're good enough.
My skills, top
believe.
tier.
So talking about making the game easier, they've taken out a lot of runes, which are like basically like the stat modifiers that you can like do out for each character. Like
I was thinking of bounty runes.
Yeah.
yeah, they're basically they're like you can give more attack damage, more critical chance, basically. But this is like before the game even starts. These are like rune pages that and the
They're
skills.
so confusing.
Yep.
Yeah. So
I'd never touched them. I was
You
just like,
just
oh,
don't
hey,
have
these are
those.
whatever. I don't care.
yeah, you really don't need like 3 or 4 pages. Like you don't need all that much. But
Or zero.
regardless of that, there were tier 3 runes. When tier 3 runes are the ones that you can buy when you're 30, and those are the ones that you will use once to the end of time.
Can you earn those, or do you have to buy them?
They were using
Well,
IP.
you buy them using my
Yeah,
IP.
you can only buy them using IP. You can't buy them using money. So
Okay.
it's for playtime. Now they've got rid of there's like tier 1 and tier 2. They still have those, but they reduced the number of runes because there were like I think the same amount of runes like types as there were in tier 3. They just reduced that by like I think more than 50% because they were like
clutter.
it was cluttered and it was using like scaling runes which really didn't matter because they would get outdated, and they had something called the rune combiner and like
Yeah, I
Ru-
never really thought
Yep.
about how the runes would affect like the meta, because the meta would shift and then the runes are still the same. So how does that even make any sense?
they're working on runes. They've talked about where it's just like we want to kind of change it up, but they can't like negate that you've spent a bunch of IP on this already. So
Yes.
so they need to like they're working on solutions for that. They've talked about it a little bit.
Curious, from people who are more plugged into League, do people like runes? Do they like that system, or would they be cool if it was just?
I mean, I've
gone?
heard people who are super into the rune pages, like I have this rune page for this and this and this, and like it's like
They're
one
so
Cool
little
idea.
the
game.
changes are
Yeah.
so small.
Yeah.
They're like
0.5%
to
Yeah.
creeps or whatever.
No,
Yeah.
it's not. It's a little bit more than that.
I
Okay.
think it
It's-
must be like when you hit 30, like you get to the
Yeah,
lower level stuff.
the higher
Okay.
level runes
Yeah.
do a lot more.
I mean, it all adds up. It all matters.
Yeah, and you can do that. So like, For junglers, I think it's the most important, because for like a mid laner or an ADC, you pretty much want crit attack damage that for like an ADC. For jungler, you could go more tanky, you could go more move speed, you could do critical chance if you're playing Yi in the jungle or something like that. Very, very specific things. But they got rid of the lower level stuff because it's just like, all right, we want to make it simpler, because there's just it was too much, and the rune combiner didn't really work as intended anymore. I mean, it worked, but it didn't really, like, no one used it.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like, all right, we're gonna get rid of it. We're gonna reduce the number of runes, and it will be flat. It'll be flat. I think everything's flat scaling at that point.
Yeah, I'm always a fan of that stuff, because there's too much clutter in like items and systems in MOBA sometimes. Like
Streamlining.
I could not tell
Seriously.
you how to put a rune into an item on Dota. You can like affect its
God.
stats and like
Yeah.
put
I
it in
don't know.
track.
Nope.
There's like hammers and chisels, and like this is uncommon, so it can't hold this thing. And like I don't know.
Don't care. Sven's got a cool hat. That's all that matters. I don't need anything in it.